Japanese now mount a full-scale invasion of China, and Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang government reluctantly decide to cooperate with Mao Zedong's communist forces to repel the invaders. Puyi finds himself in the increasingly uncomfortable position of having to support a foreign power against his own people. People that he wants to rule once more. But he has burnt his bridges with the Kuomintang and can't possibly support the communists. As their relentless advance continues, the Japanese now make a mistake that will change the course of the war and seal Puyi's fate. In December 1941, they launch a surprise attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor. By early 1945, the war is going badly for the Japanese. For the first time, the people of the Manchukuo capital Changchun are ordered to conduct air raid drills. Puyi now lives out his puppet emperor role in a daze, increasingly anxious about the Japanese chances in the war and his own fate as emperor. And he's right to be worried. In February 1945, at Yalta on the Black Sea coast, Soviet Premier Stalin, US President Roosevelt, and British Prime Minister Churchill are meeting to decide the world's fate. They agree that once the war in Europe is won, the Soviet Union will join the war against the Japanese. Puyi now spends his days glued to the radio. What he hears agitates him even more. By April, the Soviets have launched a massive assault on his notional ally Germany's capital, Berlin. On the 28th, he's horrified by the grisly circumstances of the death of the Italian leader, Mussolini. Two days later, he hears that Adolf Hitler has committed suicide. Soon afterwards, the Soviets take Berlin. And Puyi realizes that it may only be a matter of time for the Japanese. On the 6th and 9th of August, the Americans drop atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At the same time, Mao Zedong announces the final war on the Japanese invaders. For Puyi and his entourage, the writing is now clearly on the wall. On August the 9th, the Japanese inform Puyi that the Soviet Union has declared war on them. He'll have to move from the palace to an underground stronghold they've constructed in the mountains. They warn him that if the Soviets capture him, he's sure to be beheaded. They give him 3 days to pack up his treasures. These include historic and irreplaceable works of Chinese art. As well as packing treasures, Puyi orders the burning of documents and films, anything that might connect him with the Japanese. To the frightening sound of air raid sirens, on the night of August the 11th, Puyi and his family make a panicked departure. They travel by train towards the underground stronghold, only to be diverted by the Japanese. The so-called stronghold is no longer safe. Eventually, they arrive in a small and deserted mining camp. It's the rainy season and there is no radio, no newspaper. They're totally cut off. It's now the 13th of August. Two days later, Emperor Hirohito of Japan informs his people of their unconditional surrender. With the news of the surrender, Puyi realizes that once again his time as an emperor is up. Just after midnight on the 17th of August, in a warehouse in the mining camp, before a few loyal officials and officers of the Japanese army, Puyi reads his resignation declaration, abdicating for the third time in his life. The Japanese tell him they'll move him to Japan by plane. Quickly packing his most prized treasures, Puyi selects a few men to come with him and leaves in the afternoon. A Soviet propaganda reenactment starring Puyi himself tells what happens next. On landing at Shenyang airport, Puyi is arrested by the Soviet army. Many believe he is delivered to them by the Japanese as part of a peace deal, but there is no hard evidence one way or the other. On the afternoon of the 19th of August, 1945, Puyi boards a Soviet transport to fly into captivity and an uncertain fate. As Puyi flies into the unknown, Empress Wanrong and the other women and children have been left to fend for themselves. Traveling on foot, they're soon intercepted by bandits.
They had to unbraid their hair. First to go was the second mother. Something fell. A more stringent search was conducted. They went inside, where she stripped down to her underblouse and shorts. They searched through the clothes, ignoring cash, and took only jewelry and valuable items.
Empress Wanrong is eventually arrested and taken to a jail. Cut off from her opium supply, she descends into a nightmare world of withdrawal and despair. At the age of only 40, the last Empress of China dies in prison and is buried in an unmarked grave on a hillside. While the Chinese people celebrate the defeat of Japan, Puyi is arriving in the Soviet Union as a prisoner. He and the 9 men in his entourage are brought to the southern Siberian town of Chita. they are detained in a relatively comfortable former Soviet Army officers' sanatorium. Security is tight, but Pu Yi and the others soon realize they are going to be treated very well in the circumstances.
Every day, we had 3 sumptuous meals and a Russian-style afternoon tea. There were service personnel, doctors and nurses to conduct health checks, and also a radio, books, newspapers, and various kinds of recreation equipment. There were people who took us on walks. I immediately felt satisfied with this kind of life.
They are soon joined by some other high-ranking members of the Manchukuo regime. The cheetah sanatorium now becomes overcrowded, and Pu Yi's group is moved to a villa in Khabarovsk, a town close to the Chinese border just to the northeast of Manchuria. Here, life is equally good for Pu Yi. His Russian guards even get him a set of Chinese shell and marble furniture. To pass the time, Pu Yi begins to read about the Soviet system. He can't understand communism at all. He confuses Bolsheviks with an aristocracy. He's bewildered by the revolution and execution of the Tsar. When told there's never been a Bolshevik emperor, he naively wonders if he can be the first. Meanwhile, from January 1946, the powers that had forced the Japanese surrender commence a military tribunal in Tokyo to try alleged war criminals. The court makes a special request for Pu Yi to appear as a witness. After consulting with the Chinese, the Russians agree, and in August 1946, Pu Yi leaves the camp with his Soviet escort for the trip to Japan.